For a short while now, Hailey's been in a bad state. It's crazy to think that a descendant that broke the game when she first dropped makes essentially almost any weapon capable of being built for crits and has a skill set that can hit for over 17,000 modifier can be found near the bottom tier, but that's where Hailey found herself before the latest patch. Now though, with access to 2 brand new red mods that look to change the viability of a kit in the current sandbox, Hailey is making her way back into that meta talk. So in today's video we'll be looking at one of Hailey's new mods called Cold Heart, taking her from a slow gun descendant to a fast and hard hitting skill build instead. We'll be looking at how to build her, and I'll be explaining the full skill rotation for how it all comes together. We've got the modules, weaponry, Arche tuning, trigger mod and components all to come, so as always, if that sounds good to you, what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. Now if you've been under a cold rock for the best part of a year since Hailey came out, you may not know how her kit behaves and what made it so strong at the time. Her skills 1 and 3 were about the setup ready for big damage, which her 2 and her 4 could easily dish out, making her extremely potent at single target DPS. Now the main issue with the state of the game right now is that it's less about single targets and more about moving quickly between packs of enemies. Unfortunately, Cold Heart does a lot to address this, so let's take a look at how things have changed. Skill 1 becomes Ultra Cryogenic Round, a skill with moderate skill modifier that targets up to 12 enemies, or even one big target 12 times, to deal damage in a radius and apply Ultra Cryo. Now this new debuff increases damage on your skills 2 and 4 when this is applied, doing a separate damage instance of 25% per stack when hit, meaning that we can actually get an extra 225% more damage when this is fully applied. Storm's Net is nerfed a little bit with this red mod though, as it now loses all of its extra cryo properties that it had, but it also loses around about 6,000 skill modifier to hit a little bit softer. Now this does sound like a bit of an issue, but with how the kit comes together in the field, and with everything that we just talked about with the skill 1, it's not really a huge deal, and it is still more than enough for what we actually need it for. Skill 3 becomes Cold Heart, a modified form of Cold Fury, with the main change being a movement speed increase instead of getting a decrease as you start stacking this up. Now while we are also getting less base crit rate on our skills and firearms compared to the original, we actually get almost the exact same difference back when we include our passive, giving us a 15% base skill crit rate for just existing. Now keep in mind that this won't show on the stat screen, but with testing this is working in the background, and it's similar to how like crit buffs for like Albion Cavalry Gun tends to kind of like work. Lastly, we have the AoE monster on our skill 4 called Arctic Domination. This takes away the use of Zenith that Hailey is known for and replaces it with a large radius skill burst after a short period of time, dealing over 4,800% modifier up to a 17.5 meter radius around us. Now this is lethal against a lot of targets in the game right now, especially inside of Purge 10 runs, allowing you to be able to pull off a hit and run playstyle similar to that of the Electric Condensed Bunny builds. So now we know all the skills and what they can do, well how can we bring this all together to get the most from the build? Well the name of the game here is going to be speed, so we'll be starting each level with activating our Cold Heart for boost to our damage and our movement speed. With this active we can now spam away with our skill 1 and 4, alternating between the two and blasting everything away in our paths. Should we face an elite or a tougher enemy or end of level boss, we can actually use our 1 to load up the cryo debuffs and then blast them down with our skill 2, which is going to make short work of them. There will be more to this build and we'll discuss that a little bit later on, but for now these are pretty much going to be the build's basics. So let's get on to the bread and butter of the build and talk about modules. Now what we need from here is going to be a crit package for Hailey, which is going to max out of her rate, as well as going into as much damage as possible. We'll also want as much cooldown as low as possible, skill power to back up the skill cast, and range to apply it to as many targets as we can. Starting nice and simple, let's talk crits, as Hailey starts off on a base of 5% crit rate, along with the additional base from Cold Heart being a 24% at max stacks. We would usually start with a 29% base crit rate, and this would be the case if we didn't include a passive, also giving us a 15% on top of that, so that actually does take us up to 44%, meaning that we only need 127.27% multiplicative crit rate to hit max, which we can grab from sources like our modules, reactor, or our Arche tuning. Now in this case we'll be skipping the need for skill insight, instead opting for the other 3 mods of emergency measures, frontlines, and skill concentration to give us the best crit damage possible, but also contributing 92.3% to that value, which is going to be needed for the max crit rate. Now crits are great, but what good are our skills if we don't have the cooldowns low enough to be able to use them? So with the combination of Nimble Fingers, MP Conversion, and the 2 focus on mods of Chill and Singular, we can expect a 74.3% cooldown from our modules alone, which is perfect for the skill spam, while also boosting our skill power and our modifiers so we hit even harder. Skill expansion is also needed here, giving us a huge 92.3% increase to our skills range, being able to bounce off of and hit as many targets as possible per skill cast. And then when it comes to Ancestor mods, there's only so many areas that we're actually looking to boost up. The best rolls that we'd be after though will be critical hit damage, chill power ratio, singular power ratio, range or cooldown. Now all 5 of these can be worked around in the build, but ideally going for damage on the 3 rolls is going to be your best in slot. You don't actually need all 3 to get this build to work, as all the footage that's been gathered with this Ancestor mod that I have right here, and that's just a purple into crit damage and a blue into extra range. Now as for the last mod, it really ties into our trigger mod, so we might as well actually cover both together. Relative Speed is a brand new trigger mod for episode 2 with quite a potent effect. Every time that we hit an enemy with a slow type skill, which is going to be our skill 1, we will be building up a stack of relative speed, where at 30 stacks we have a weak point shot that's primed and ready to dish out a huge skill power AoE with a 15 meter radius of the target. Now this damage seems to be affected by your max MP and the roll for the multiplier on the mod, but with this blue roll here and minimal MP investment on the build, I was able to hit for crits harder than Hailey's skill 4, and this can actually be done at range, making it much safer to clear out hordes that are spawning in front of you. Now the Arche tech mod of choice ties in with relative speed, adding some new effects while we also have the trigger mod active. Now as we gain speed stacks, we'll also be gaining more skill power modifier up to a max of 30%, which will help us out a little bit more with our skill 1, but most importantly, as long as we have at least 1 stack of speed active, we gain 45.8% more crit damage on our slow skills. Now what this means is that we can actually use our auto lock skill 1 for AoE damage to be able to hit like a truck, and that allows us to go back and forth between the casts of a 1 and 4 to be able to wipe mobs from the level. So swapping on over to our gear and starting with the reactor, Cold Hard does us a favour and makes all of our skills into the singular variety, so a frozen singularity reactor is going to be the play here. Now after that, for the sub rolls, we want to spam and hit as hard as we can, so we'll rock both a cooldown and a crit damage roll here. Now if you've seen any of my VSer builds in the past, this reactor will be familiar, as it's actually the same that we use for Absolute Zero VSer, so if you need to be able to farm one, then you might as well get to it and you get 2 birds with 1 stone. For our components though, I've seen a lot of people recommending Polar Knight, and while yes it is a set that works with Hailey, even though it isn't stated on any of your skill cards, you're actually sacrificing a fair bit of damage to be able to use that set. Now while 60% crit damage does sound amazing for Hailey, it does require you to be able to keep and maintain those max stacks for the full boost, and pretty much you're not actually going to have that, so if you ever do drop stacks at any point, you're actually back to square one. But there's also the fact that Polar Knight just does less damage, even at max stacks, than the skill power boost that Slayer offers, as I made that mistake quite a while back with an initial VSer build, which then forced me to do the testing in the math, so I actually do know that that is going to be the case. So with that now covered, the best in slot here is going to be a 4-piece Slayer set, which has given us a huge boost to our skill power numbers, but also opening up those skill power buckets for our chill skill power to be able to bounce off of. Now for the substats, we want our typical HP and MP rolls for durability and help managing our MP bar, and then for the cores, the usual HP and defense rolls are going to be perfect to slot in here. For the weaponry, as our skills now become singular, there really isn't much of a typical stat stick for us to be able to use based off that skill type. Now, that being said, there is one gun that we can use that will help us with resistance shreds and chill skill power, so due to this, we'll be rocking the Frost Watcher. Now, as a damage platform, the Frost Watcher is very mediocre. It needs a lot of investment to get going, but as a stat stick, it does a fantastic job of weakening enemy chill resistances, along with a flat chill skill power boost, all for being able to land a critical or weak point shot. Now, as we'll be wanting to aim for weak points anyway because of that relative speed trigger mod, having these bonuses on shots makes the build much stronger. Now, as for the guns build, cores wise, we'll want 2 fire rate cores, 1 for a free slot and 1 for the green slot, 1 firearm attack and 1 chill attack. For the purple core, anything can go in here as we won't really be taking advantage of it inside of this build. As for the sub rolls, the only 3 we definitely want are going to be weak point damage, chill and firearm attacks. The last I currently have down for multi-hit damage, so if you do want to go for the full investment into this weapon, then the multi-hit mods are actually going to come in handy quite here. Now for the modules, we don't need much in here as the gun's damage will be tiny compared to that of our skill damage, and that being said, our main focus here is going to be crit rate, as our skill 3 will stack basic kind of crit rate for us, but it's not enough alone to be able to get us to 100% rate for the gun's passive to kick in, so therefore with modules like Better Insight and Edging Shot we can get it pretty close, but we can almost essentially guarantee it with a slot in of Lethal Finish. Now the rest of the mods are nice to have, and that does include things like Fire Rate Up, allowing us to be able to spam away at the weak points for easier and faster collections of our gun's benefits. Tuning time now, and it's pretty bog standard to cover for the crit based skill Descendant, heading right for the skill power and range buffs, then upwards for cooldown, more skill power and the crit package, and then finishing it off with the Mutant cell of choice. Now, as we'll be applying debuffs like Cryo as we start to spam, going for Arche Concentration is going to be one of the nicer options for us to go here, so slot that in and benefit from the nice crit buff for all of your skills. For the Season 3 Episode 2 reinforcements, there isn't really much for Hailey to massively benefit from here, so we'll actually just grab a few odd boosts for some quality of life and then make the build a little bit more fluid. Now first off, we'll be landing critical firearm attacks, so we can actually grab something like Ammo System to help us with reload speeds and provide us with less downtime when we start spamming away those gunshots. Next we'll grab the tried and tested Selective Neurostimulation, as MP can get worryingly low if you've kind of been a little bit unlucky in the run, especially with those little blue balls that kind of drop on the floor. And then lastly, we've grabbed Deploy Hardened Shell for some extra damage reduction as we narrow the gap between enemies and ourselves. That said, these were just my 3 top choices, but there isn't really much harm going for swapping these around if you do prefer going for other setups. And then lastly, in this section, I'll normally tell you to be able to go for the best fellow to use for the build. Typically, there is going to be a clear-cut option out of the 3, but in this case though, any of the fellows will actually be fine to use, so go for personal preference. Getting a HP heal is never bad because we're going to be up close and personal with the enemies. More MP is nice, but not a necessity to be able to start funding all of our skills. And as we'll be firing our Frostwatcher from time to time, the Hunting Dog giving you ammo isn't going to be a bad effect. Personally, I've gone with the Hunting Dog for ammo, but feel free to be able to use your favourite and you're still going to have a good time. And with all that out of the way, that wraps it up for my Cold Heart Hailey build. Overall, I do find it a lot of fun to run the Super Reactor with this build, as it makes mincemeat out of all the enemies in your way, and is one of the few builds that can handle the end boss without the need for the Deus Ex Manus sword for fast kills. Now, I do think it's kind of odd how detached from our initial builds this red mod makes her feel, but it is kind of fun, and it does offer an alternative to Bunny for fast AoE clearing. I do also have a camo sniper build in the works, just testing out the last couple of things, so feel free to keep an eye out for that on the channel and that build video very soon. And so this is a section I want to hear from you. What are your current thoughts on Hailey's buff? How do you feel about Ancestor Mod farming? And then lastly, what are your current thoughts on Season 3 so far? Let me know all that and more down below. Massive thank you for making your way to the end of the video. As I always say, keep yourself safe, keep yourselves well, and I'll see you all on our next video.